When someone departs this earthly realm before their time, we hold tight to their memory, cherishing it as dearly as the moments we once shared. Their essence remains woven into the fabric of our hearts, shining brightly against the backdrop of loss. Today's case takes us down south to Hendersonville, a town deep in North Carolina. But don't be fooled by the numbers. 83.5% may claim to be white, but that doesn't mean they're fair or just. Only a measly 6.73% are black, and another 6.46% are mixed race, leaving little room for diversity. It's no surprise that Hendersonville has a long way to go when it comes to racial equality and fair treatment under the law. They didn't even acknowledge Black History Month until almost 50 years after it was recognized by the US government. And let's not forget what the ACLU had to say about this place. They've been terrorizing and mistreating Black folks for far too long, just like the rest of America. You want proof? Just take a look at North Carolina's Racial Justice Act. It's clear that Hendersonville has been plagued by discrimination and injustice towards people of color for far too long, especially our Black brothers who are constantly denied their basic right to seek justice. The tragic death of Elijah Timmons, son of Patricia King, who we will come to know in this story, echoes that of Sonia Massey's case, with one crucial difference. Patricia survived, but her son did not. Elijah's final moments were filled with agony and betrayal. According to local media reports, a big party went down at the Orchard Bar and Grill in Hendersonville during the wee hours of the morning on Black Friday. How ironic. But as always, there's more to the story than what makes it in the press. We believe that the real truth lies with Elijah's mother, Patricia Ann King. Sure, the news says there was some shouting between two women and a fistfight between two men outside in the parking lot where around 40 cars were parked. But what they won't tell you is that when Elijah was shot in the head, Patricia's pleas for help were ignored. Her hands were bound by metal shackles as she was forcibly thrown to the pavement. The rough concrete tore at her skin, causing her pants to slip down and reveal her bare backside. As if that wasn't humiliating enough, the officers nearby couldn't contain their amusement, making lewd remarks about her curvaceous buttocks. To make matters even worse, they had the audacity to accuse her of assault and resisting arrest for just trying to be by her son's side. Can you believe it took authorities 8 long months to even bother testing the murder weapon, despite clear evidence and a witness? And even then, they left Patricia in the dark and refused to give her any updates. Instead, she had to fight for every bit of information while being met with silence and cover-ups. It's like they were adding salt to her wounds after losing her own flesh and blood in such a senseless way. Despite learning that her son was still alive when he was covered under a sheet, Patricia received no support and was basically told to just accept it. Can you imagine the pain and frustration she must have felt? But despite her pleas for justice and accountability, she was treated like a nuisance by the very people who were supposed to protect and serve. It's appalling to see the footage of her encounter with police, where multiple officers can be seen agreeing with her, but refusing to take responsibility for their actions. And instead of showing compassion, they responded with violence and aggression, leaving Patricia helpless as she watched her child die. How can trained law enforcement behave this way? It's dehumanizing and shows a lack of basic empathy. Even after charges against Patricia were dropped, she is still traumatized by the incident that occurred after her son was targeted and attacked by another group. Witnesses confirm that there was an accomplice waiting to retrieve the weapon used in the attack, making this tragedy even more heartbreaking. Welcome to No Tears for Black Girls. Elijah Edward Timmons III passed away suddenly on November 24, 2023, at the mere age of 30 in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Born on August 21, 1993, he lived life to the fullest until his final moments. He treasured time with his beloved mother, siblings, and relished fishing trips with his father, cousins, and sons. He also reveled in bonding with his stepfather over their shared love for cars and motorcycles. His nieces and nephews were his everything, and he was blessed to hold his namesake, Adore Life Elijah, before he departed. Elijah leaves behind his heartbroken mother, Patricia Ann King, stepfather Gabe Hogan, father Elijah Edward Timmons Jr., brothers Jaytwan, Anthony, and Darius, sisters Ontaria, Tranis, Kuyonte, and Gailisha, grandparents Terry Whiteside, Perry King, and Mammy Wade. He also leaves behind 4 beloved sons, 1-year-old Yair Timmons, with long-term girlfriend Tishala P., 12-year-old Sear Zion, and 10-year-old Emilion, with former partner Brittany Williams, 6-year-old Kizarion, with ex-partner Shanika Collins. He was preceded in death by his brother Kuivante, great-grandparents Ruth and Frank Whiteside, great-grandmother Lily Ruth Hill, and grandfather Elijah Edward Timmons Sr. A celebration of life service was held on Saturday, December 9, 2023 in Asheville, North Carolina. However, it wasn't until Thanksgiving night, 2 weeks prior to Elijah's burial, that the tragic events leading up to his death were unveiled. After a heated altercation that ended with Elijah being shot in the head, his grief-stricken mother, Patricia King, was arrested at the scene. All she wanted to do was check on her son and see if he was still alive, but instead, she was met with brutality from the police. She was thrown to the ground, handcuffed, manhandled, and humiliated as her pants were forcibly removed in public while she was denied access to her dying son. According to Patricia, Elijah was still gasping for air when she was taken into custody. A video that she shared with No Tears for Black Girls shows witnesses desperately trying to save him while the same officer who attacked her stood by. This is just another tragic example of the injustices faced by Black women at the hands of law enforcement and society, even in their most vulnerable moments. Patricia Ann King is a woman who takes pride in her relationships, especially with her 17 beautiful grandchildren. Her youngest child was Elijah Timmons. Patricia's first son tragically passed away in a car accident 7 years ago, leaving her devastated. She believes he was purposely run off the road, and the Hendersonville police never took action to solve the case. The loss of her son Elijah and the way she has been treated by HPD only adds salt to her wounds. Now Patricia is not only mourning the loss of her son, but also raising his young daughter and her twin sister's daughters, ages 8, 10, and 11. Despite this tragedy, Patricia has dedicated herself to helping others. She works as a community health worker and organizes support groups for mothers who have lost their children. This passion for aiding others has always been a part of Patricia's life. She worked as a CNA for 19 years before becoming a bus driver for a Black charter school. To keep busy, she continues to take classes and be involved in the community health field. Although she has been single for 3 years now, Patricia was previously married to the father of all 7 of her children for 6 years, before getting into a 24-year relationship with her ex-partner. Elijah, or Dude, as Patricia affectionately called him, due to his mature nature, was always full of energy. Despite his mischievous behavior, he was incredibly smart and had a great sense of humor. Even at a young age, he was independent and loved taking things apart just to put them back together again. However, after Patricia divorced her husband, Elijah began struggling in school and acting out. It seemed like he was searching for his absent father and feeling let down by his absence. The family moved between North Carolina and Atlanta frequently, with Elijah spending summers with his father until eventually living with him for full school years as he got older. As a teenager, he longed for freedom and spent time with friends, but Patricia was working 2 jobs and had to be strict. She didn't allow him to have visitors or go out, insisting that he stay home. He eventually fell in love with an older girl named Brittany, who lived with her mother. Despite Patricia's objections, their relationship continued, and Elijah became a father at a young age to 2 sons, Z and Mealy. Patricia became a proud grandmother, but her son also fathered a child with Shanika, a girl named Key. Years later, Patricia's son met a woman named Shay, who stood by him through thick and thin. She witnessed his struggles and triumphs, including the birth of their son, Year. As a father, Patricia's son showered love and tenderness upon all three of his children, especially Key. Despite facing injustices and serving time in jail, he worked tirelessly to provide for his family and turn his life around. But the system was against him from the start, as he constantly faced mistreatment from biased police officers and an unfair justice system. Despite never showing disrespect, he was repeatedly targeted and unjustly held in jail for petty reasons. Patricia was advised to be tough on her son, but she refused to do so because she saw his goodness. In jail, he endured countless hardships, while his complaints were ignored and bonds set at unattainable amounts. Despite these obstacles, he persisted by working multiple jobs to support his children and striving for a brighter future. Though not without flaws, he never gave up on turning his life around. Upon arriving at her mother's house, Patricia immediately recognized the familiar faces of her family members, all gathered together in lively conversation. She stayed for a few hours before deciding to head back to the city. Knowing that going to her mother's house would mean having to stay overnight due to limited sleeping arrangements, she resisted the temptation and didn't want to intrude on their time with her son's newborn niece, Adore Life Elijah. The first time she held her was earlier that evening before they left for Patricia's house. Upon safely returning home, her son called to check in and ask if she still planned on going out. Despite his drunken suggestion for her to retrieve his gun for protection, which was captured by her room ring camera and later shown at court days before Thanksgiving, Patricia got a call from her son, Elijah. He needed a ride home from work, and she happily obliged. As they drove, he revealed his desire to spend the holiday with his family instead of on the job. She was touched by his constant joking and laughter throughout the day as they chatted on the phone. On their way back to Patricia's house, Elijah mentioned needing to make a stop at his own place first to grab some clothes. They ended up making a circle from Candler to Hendersonville to Brevard, spending quality time with loved ones at each stop along the way. When they finally arrived back at Patricia's, Elijah took a shower while they bonded with his sister and her kids. The whole family then gathered in the dining area, enjoying drinks and catching up as Patricia finished whipping up delicious banana puddings for everyone. But as the night went on, Patricia couldn't help but notice how much Elijah seemed eager and obsessed with taking selfies with all the little ones. It was unusual behavior for him, but she brushed it off at first. However, when he refused to listen to a gospel song by Marvin Sapp and insisted on playing other music instead, she started to feel uneasy. Memories flooded back of how Jesus had always been there for her during tough times, and she couldn't shake off that feeling of discomfort. Suddenly, Elijah opened up about his brother, who had miraculously survived being shot thanks to wearing a Virgin Mary t-shirt and Jesus piece. More people arrived at the party, including Shay from Charlotte, and they continued to drink and socialize. Despite Patricia's protests of not wanting to look crazy, Elijah insisted on taking more selfies with her throughout the night. The last one was when she went to change, and Shay joined them before they all headed out to their cars. But right before they left, Patricia's daughter noticed that Elijah was missing. She remembered seeing him asleep on her bed earlier and quickly woke him up to join them in the car. As they drove to his grandmother's house, Patricia couldn't help but feel guilty for disturbing his sleep. But they ended up having an enjoyable rest of the evening together with family. However, as she rode out into the empty streets of downtown Asheville, where everyone else seemed to be celebrating Thanksgiving at a party in an orchard, Patricia couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that lingered. It was like a dark cloud hanging over their perfect holiday gathering. Patricia rushed home, yearning for the comfort of her sanctuary. She shed her clothes and sunk into a steaming bath, hoping to wash away the stress of the day. Donning her satin pajamas, she snuggled into bed with her phone close by, ready to drift off into slumber. But sleep was fleeting as her daughter's frantic call pierced through the peaceful night. Patricia's heart raced as she learned that her son had been shot. Without hesitation, she threw on some socks and scrambled for her slides, dreading what she would find when she arrived at the scene. Her worst fears were confirmed as an officer blocked her from reaching her son's lifeless body. In a frenzy, she fought against the restraints and screamed for mercy, only to be tackled to the ground with brutal force. As chaos and screams filled the air, Patricia could only pray for salvation from this nightmare. With each passing second, her desperation grew as she realized her own child was suffering just a few feet away from her in this unjust attack by law enforcement. And then, darkness overtook her. Patricia's mind was racing, trying to comprehend the brutality that had just unfolded in front of her. Her body ached from being dragged across the pavement by the police. She could see her child laying nearby, his life hanging by a thread, but with each attempt to reach him, she was met with force and aggression. The officers showed no mercy as they shoved her into the back of their car, ignoring her cries and pleas for answers. As they drove her to the station, their threats and hostility only intensified. And when they finally arrived, Patricia's worst fears were realized as she was stripped of her dignity and treated with utter disrespect. It was clear that these officers saw her not as a vulnerable mother, desperate for her child, but as a criminal to be punished. Despite being confused and terrified, Patricia refused to remain silent about the injustice she witnessed. But even speaking out came at a cost, as one officer threatened her with violence, while another went so far as to spit in her water. In this moment of chaos and cruelty, Patricia couldn't help but wonder what would become of her and her children in this unjust situation. Patricia was baffled. It didn't make any sense. Why would her son's killer do something so cruel? Patricia sat stiffly in the interrogation room, listening as Detective Bonanno detailed her son's brutal murder. The air was thick with tension and sadness as she awaited the video footage that would reveal the truth. After expressing his condolences, the detective finally played the footage for Patricia, showing her a world of violence and betrayal. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her son being attacked by multiple assailants, all while a girl unknown to Patricia stood by. In a desperate attempt to understand the events leading up to her son's death, Patricia begged to take a picture of the mysterious girl for later investigation. But as they continued watching, it became clear that this was no random act of violence. Her beloved son had been targeted by Terrence Burton, calmly walking towards him with a gun in hand before taking his life. The cold-blooded killer made his escape in a flashy red car, leaving Patricia numb with grief and determination to seek justice for her son's senseless death. And as she shared her suspicions with Detective Bonanno, they both knew that Terrence had done this before. He was a seasoned murderer whose thirst for blood could not be quenched. Her son knew the killer, and when she asked witnesses about the incident, she got some of the answers she was looking for. The chaos erupted outside the club, but inside, eyewitnesses saw Terrence approach Elijah with a hug before unleashing his savage attack. Patricia was stunned and demanded answers. She interrogated witnesses, asking if he saw the assailant flee in a car and if he remembered the license plate number. They confirmed everything and provided crucial details to identify the perpetrator. With newfound clarity on the culprit, Patricia vowed to take action. She made 2 calls, one to the DA for a warrant and another to the detective for an update. Yet, days passed without any news or progress in apprehending the suspect. Fuming with rage, Patricia relentlessly contacted the detective, demanding to know why her son's killer was still roaming free. The flimsy excuse given was that they couldn't find him, leaving Patricia with a gnawing sense of dread for her family's safety. A few days later, while her daughter's car broke down in a parking lot, she came across the mother of Terrence Burton, the man who took Elijah's life. Without hesitation, Patricia raced to the scene and saw Terrence and his clan cowering in their cars. Though there was a police car nearby, it was conveniently off-duty. Drawing on all her strength to contain her frustration, Patricia tried to warn the officer about Terrence's wanted status, but was met with indifference. She then bombarded the detective with calls until her daughter finally got through. It turned out that Terrence was being questioned by the cops for intel on a shooting that happened weeks ago. But despite being identified as the shooter, 30-year-old Terrence had yet to be arrested. Confused and fed up, Patricia demanded an explanation as to why they hadn't just picked him up already. The detective revealed that they were also rounding up other suspects from Buncombe County based on phone records found at the crime scene. And a couple of weeks later, all those individuals were taken into custody for drug charges. But even with this significant development, there was still no news of Terrence's arrest or court dates. Determined to get answers, Patricia called the police department but was brushed off by Detective Bonanno, who insisted on a meeting on December 12th, the same day as Elijah's funeral. Despite voicing her concerns, she reluctantly agreed. Deep down, Patricia knew something wasn't right. It all seemed too fishy, yet eerily fitting at the same time. On December 12th, Patricia and her daughter made their way to the police department, just 2 days after laying Elijah to rest. As they arrived, they were separated and taken to different rooms to give statements. Patricia was led into a room called the training room, where she was greeted by Detective Alan Bonanno, District Attorney Andrew Murray, and Police Captain Patton. With Shay by her side, Patricia took a seat as Bonanno positioned himself at the corner of the table on her left, with the DA in the middle and Captain Patton to his left. As Detective Bonanno droned on about the investigation, Patricia's mind was consumed with thoughts of her son. The video evidence they presented only served to deepen her confusion and disbelief. She hadn't seen any muzzle flash or sparks of fire when she watched her son die in that crowd. How could so many people have missed something so crucial? Her frustration grew as she tried to make sense of their claims. Were they really accusing her son of having a gun? But Detective Bonanno delivered the final blow, admitting that their investigation had hit a dead end. Despite hours of work and multiple individuals reviewing the footage, there was no clear answer. It was almost too much for Patricia to bear, feeling like she was being blamed for something she knew nothing about. The detective responded calmly, explaining that he avoided mentioning specific details to spare Patricia any further distress. She scoffed, stating that she was not easily manipulated. He reassured her that he had conducted a thorough investigation, but the evidence pointed towards her son being the aggressor in the altercation. Patricia argued vehemently that her son had been attacked by a group and claimed that any actions he took were justified in self-defense. The detective mentioned something about a disagreement turning violent, but Patricia insisted that the video footage shown to her did not support this claim. She accused the police of bias and stated that her son was not involved in any gang activity. Despite her protests, the detective refused to press charges until someone from the parking lot came forward with new information. Shay became upset and announced she was leaving with her child, prompting Patricia to follow suit while the detective followed behind, apologizing for his actions along the way. Patricia listened intently as the details of her son Elijah's shooting were recounted. The prosecutor claimed to have presented video evidence to the defendant, but declined to press charges. Witnesses who saw the entire incident remained silent, either out of fear or indifference. Shay, who had witnessed it all, revealed to Patricia that Shakelia Campbell, a former girlfriend of her father Ernest Robbs, also known as Pee-wee, was now dating Keon Anderson and was present at the time of the shooting. Shay believed that Shakelia had played a part in providing the gun used to kill Elijah and confronted her about it. However, Shakelia denied any involvement and insisted that Keon had taken her gun without her knowledge. But Shay knew better. Shakelia was just trying to cover her tracks. Rumors on the streets suggested that Shakelia had sneaked the gun into the club in her purse, and somehow it had ended up in Terrence's hands, with which he shot Elijah. When Shay asked her father, Pee-wee, to inquire about the purse that allegedly held the gun used in the shooting, Shekelia eventually admitted she possessed it. According to her, Keon had cursed her out for having the purse. Patricia couldn't make sense of it all. She suggested that Shay record their conversation when she went to retrieve the purse, just in case Shekelia let something slip. Despite not fully believing that Shekelia was involved, Patricia wanted to leave no stone unturned in their investigation. Shay was visibly distressed and still struggling after what happened. As she arrived at Shekelia's house and stepped out of her car, Shekelia immediately began talking about how Keon had taken her gun that night. Unbeknownst to Shekelia, Shay turned on her phone's recording feature and quietly captured their incriminating conversation from behind. Shekelia ranted on about various events that had occurred, but made sure to tell Shay that 2 years prior, Elijah had become enraged at her for something and threatened her with a gun. She claimed that he was later killed in the same manner. Hearing this, Shay felt sick and turned to Pee-wee for clarification. He confirmed that Shekelia had told him the story, but stated that she had said Elijah pointed the gun at her instead. None of it made sense to Shay or Patricia. According to what they heard, Keon believed that Elijah had been intimate with Terrence Burton's children's mother, who was also involved in drugs, along with Shekelia and Keon. However, Patricia knew that her son had no interest in such relationships due to their drug use. Terrence's children's mother was hot for Elijah, but he refused her advances as she was strung out on drugs. She loved to party in her private after-hours spot with a stripper pole in the living room, where wild kickbacks took place every night and weekend after the club. Rumors flew about the scandalous things that went down there, including inappropriate acts in front of her own 12-year-old daughter. The poor child even had to sleep with a knife under her pillow for protection. It's sickening to think what may have happened to that young girl. In videos shown to us by Patricia, Keon's girlfriend Shekelia can be seen near the action during the fight between Terrence and Elijah. At one point, Keon had to physically push Shekelia away from the brawl, while Shay desperately tried to stop Terrence from attacking an intoxicated Elijah. According to Patricia, a local guy known as Fish was also present during the murder as a witness. We're not sure of Fish's level of involvement, but Patricia received a photo and tip identifying him as Marquise Resper. During the incident, Fish was right there taking selfies and recording everything that went down, later sharing it on Instagram Live and other social media platforms. This begs the question, were any of these witnesses questioned by police? And why haven't more people spoken out or sought justice for Elijah's tragic death? It seems only Patricia is fighting for justice in this case. After Shay revealed the truth about Shekelia's involvement in setting up Elijah and the shooting, Patricia felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The injustice and oppression that her family faced was suffocating her. She watched videos of Shekelia hovering over Elijah, pulling Shay away, and then cowering behind a wall when she realized what was about to happen. It was crystal clear that Shekelia had knowledge of the situation and chose to do nothing to prevent it. Patricia made a promise to herself. She would do everything in her power to seek justice for her son's senseless death.